The challenge here is, given all the information that we've shared, one of the places we landed with the book was creating this rubric. This is something that we do training on. We're always happy to talk more about. We also included it up on the site if you wanted to look at it. We'd always prefer you go through our training with it, but Bethany can give us the 10,000 foot view.
Well, I was looking through, we had about, I think we have 100 cases that we looked at, which we used those and some others, but there's thousands more. We just picked 100 that were high profile white supremacist cases that demonstrated some of these things. Because we saw, like I said before, a lot of the typical risk factors that you see in a lot of these threat cases and violence cases, the objectification of their victims, hardened thoughts, hardened opinions, not being able to change their thoughts. As Lisa mentioned, a lot of conflict with authority, whether it's law enforcement or other authorities, teachers, parents, fixation, focus, lack of empathy, feeling persecuted, feeling trapped, like the world is changing and I'm being left behind. So there's a lot of those risk factors, but we also saw these things a little bit separately that you don't always see in those other cases, and that really point to that white supremacist indoctrination. So we focused on these for this rubric. We looked at appearance. In appearance, we're looking at tattoos. We're looking at those jackets Lisa mentions with the Q snake on the back. A lot of times as they get involved in these groups online or in person and are doing this research, they find these symbols and will incorporate them into their daily life, bumper stickers, pins. So that's something that you can start to watch for. And this list that's on the screen there is on the site. So you can pull up this and be able to read through different levels, but it kind of goes through none up to maybe a little bit of interest. They start collecting things. Then they start displaying them either at home or in the person, and then eventually it becomes consistent that they have a tattoo that so something's always with them, one of these symbols. The next thing we looked at was affiliation. So this was another one. You don't always see a lot of the violence cases that we see are one person acting alone. They have these feelings, but in these cases, we often see whether they act alone in the case itself, they're affiliated with one of these groups. I think in the cases we looked at, the 100 cases we looked at, about 36 of them involved 2, 3, or even more perpetrators. And of the ones that didn't, many of those were affiliated with one of these groups or considered themselves a neo-Nazi, a white nationalist, and used that affiliation to bolster how they felt. And that's you see here. You see, again, they go from no affiliation to maybe a little bit of interest. Oh, this kind of sounds cool. I'm with this group. Maybe they start attending a few meetings here and there or go on to a chat room. And then they become more active, and eventually they start trying to get into leadership or start recruiting their friends, other people into these groups. And then we look at absorption, and this is the knowledge they're picking up. So it's learning the symbols, it's learning the history of the movement, it's learning about other cases, other attacks, other acts of violence. And so this is where we saw this even pre-internet. We see there's cases pre-internet where people had all this Nazi memorabilia, or there was one case in London, there was a person who set a bunch of nail bombs around the city, hoping to start a race war. And he had a whole collage of bombings in his apartment that they found. But with the advent of the internet, obviously this became a lot easier. All this stuff is so easy for people to access in so many places. Go from passing interest into, let me look around a little bit more, to really studying these cases and then starting to collect and teach others. That's a big part of this.
In terms of the focused learning, I watched an interview with the person who is the curator of the archive of the James Mason writing. So there's a lot, just Siege, but a lot. It's at the University of Kansas. It's the only place that has his writings. And she was saying that it's been rather frightening in recent years because the interest has just skyrocketed.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, and I never know, is this for a research paper or is this something, something completely different?
That's what's much with the symbols. It's hard to tell.
Yeah.
They cloak it in other things.
Mm-hmm.
And then we look at acquisition of weapons, which is something we see in other threat cases. But I think what we found here was the quantity of weaponry that is collected is much higher than in a lot of other cases. Like these groups have arsenals, a lot of them, and will use not just firearms, but we saw a lot of arson and bombing cases. That was a real big, it adds that terror effect even more. You have oftentimes more victims, but we did see a lot of paramilitary. So they've got body armor, they've got armor piercing bullets. They really have arsenals that are envious to some militaries. Like they really, that's a thing we saw here that we saw more than in other cases. So it's something definitely to be watching for. And then appointment. This is what switches someone from someone who is maybe believes these things, feels real strongly, and actually brings them to a point where they will commit violence. So they have this mission, they believe these things, and that the mission becomes so much a part of their lives and so drives them that they get to the point where they say, well, if I believe this thing, I need to do something about it. And it's that switch from I just believe it to, all right, time to take action. And that action is almost always violent. And so it's that switch from, all right, maybe, or like, what kind of targets would I do? Like, who might I attack, to developing a real clear plan of, okay, this is this is my fixation. This is who I'm focused on. This is who I need to attack. So it's that process of going from, yeah, we should do something, to here's my plan, and here's what we need to do, and here's what I'm going to do.